Okay, it's time for structural change. Chapter 6 of the book. So, let's see. Structural change. So, what is structural change? So, structural change is about a change in the relative quantities of goods that we produce and consume in an economy. And of course, in a closed economy or in the global economy, which is closed, production and consumption is basically the same thing. Yeah. Well, of course, there is investment as well, but then we're ignoring capital. So, okay. And remember, we talked about the follows three mechanisms. And yeah, let's have a little revision on follows three mechanisms. So if we go with Cobb Douglas and skip capital, we have something like this, don't we? And this has constant factor shares of labor capital and resources, energy, metals, whatever, and that's what we see in the data. But this is telling us way too little about what's really going on to really know what to do policy-wise. So we want to know more about what's behind this. One idea is to say, look, y is ARR to the epsilon plus ALL to the epsilon. Oh, normally I'd have those the other way around, but of course it doesn't matter. So the 1 over epsilon. And in the short, epsilon is negative. So in the short run, there's poor substitutability. But in the long run, if, for instance, R goes down, AR will go up to compensate. And we end up with this, an elasticity of substitution equal to 1. But when we look at the data in more detail, we see that AR seems to track AL. There's no lack of increases in AR, for instance, for energy efficiency. So if AR tracks AL, we would expect, based on this production function, R to track L. But R doesn't track L, R tracks Y, it grows much faster. Okay, so why might that be? Maybe it's because of one of the other of Solo's mechanisms, which is shifting between goods. Maybe Y is actually some function of a bunch of different goods. And over time, we shift from one type of good to another. And if these goods are intrinsically like energy smaller, if these don't use much energy, they're labor intensive, and these use more energy, this shift could explain the data. Okay. So that's our kind of motivation for why we're curious about structural change, interested in structural change. Structural change is always kind of messy. It's kind of messy to model. So I've got a published paper on this with quite a tricky model. We're going to look at some simpler cases. Right, so that was why we need structural change to explain the energy data. Growth and structural change. So do we expect to see structural change? Of course we do. Yeah. So when GDP is very low, we're basically all eating porridge, right? But then as GDP increases over time, we're going to expand the range of goods we eat. So as well as porridge, we're going to be having like better housing. And then after a while, we don't want just porridge and housing. We might start wanting like consumer goods like mobile phones or whatever. Oh, of course, this is a long way down the line, but we might want train journeys and things in between. And later we want cars and so on. We're constantly expanding the range of goods that we consume. And there's a sort of systematic aspect to this, that early on, we mainly produce and consume agricultural products. Later, we tend to shift into manufactured goods. And even further on, we tend to shift into services. Services might sound super environmentally friendly until you realize that transport is a service. Whoops. Transport is one of the most energy intensive things we can spend our cash on. So what causes these shifts? In general, in economics, shifts in consumption patterns, we tend to think, look, they must be either driven by income effects or substitution effects. So an income effect, if you consume more of something due to an income effect, is because rich people kind of like this stuff. It's the luxury good, if you like. There's specific definitions for luxury goods, but I'm not too interested in that specifically. But in general, we start consuming more of things as we get richer. It's because they're luxury goods, at least for the poor people we were 20 years or 50 years earlier. So, yeah, no, I've already talked about the other things. So let's just stay here. The other potential reason is a substitution effect. That, so this is, we got richer and we like this stuff when we're rich. The other one is the stuff got cheaper and we like cheap stuff. So that would be the substitution effect. So maybe energy intensive stuff gets cheaper over time and we shift into it over time due to that because we like cheap stuff. Why does this matter? Why can't we just look at the long run data and say, well, look, you know, actually, we know that taxes will have this big effect because we have a big elasticity of substitution between labor and resources. So we should go for taxes. But then what if we can't do taxes? Okay, we want to reduce emissions from flying, say, but because of international agreements and leakage and so on, which hopefully you've learned about leakage a bit, perhaps in the policy course, because of various potential reasons, we can't do a tax. So then we're looking for other potential instruments. We're thinking, should we subsidize increases in our resource productivity? Or should we have a tax on flying? So the ideal is an emissions tax, but we could have a tax per flight. We have one of those in Sweden. We just brought it in a year and a half ago, right? I think it was a year and a half ago. If to know how these are going to play out, we need to understand more about the system. Okay. So that's some background on structural change. And I think I'm going to stop this video here. Oh, try again.